Today's moment in Black history is brought by Althea Gibson. Althea Gibson was known for breaking athletic barriers and breaking rackets. She was one of the very first Black athletes to cross the color lines in American and international tennis, and she was also one of the first Black female pro golfers. She was extremely talented, and she had to fight for literally everything that she got. She paved the way for African American athletes across the spectrum, including Tiger Woods and Venus and Serena Williams. Without people like Althea Gibson, sports would be a very different place. Althea was born in 1927 in South Carolina. Her parents were poor, they were sharecroppers, and they honestly didn't see that as a life that they wanted for their family. And so as part of the Great Migration, they moved to New York and into a small apartment in Harlem. Althea was not great at school, and in fact, she would often skip school because honestly, it just was not her thing. And she would get in trouble, and her dad would not be very nice about her skipping school. And so she became pretty efficient at entertaining herself outside. One of the first hobbies she picked up was paddleball. She learned very, very quickly, was very, very adept. And by age 12, she was the New York City women's champion for women of all ages. Althea found sports a lot more entertaining than going to school. And so by age 13, she was barely going to school. She was spending most of her time hanging out in the streets, causing some trouble, playing sports, doing things that she kind of felt like doing. Every once in a while, she would be too afraid to go home because she knew her father would not be happy with her skipping school. And so from time to time, she lived in a homeless shelter. One day, a neighbor of hers saw her playing instead of being at school. And he's like, you know what? I feel like you'd be great at tennis. And at first she was like, I don't think so. That is kind of a weak game, isn't it? But she very quickly learned that skill and stamina were definitely things that she could hone in and become great at. At age 14, she entered and won her very first tournament in the American Tennis Association for New York State, and she continued to win in subsequent years. In fact, she won 10 years pretty much straight with the exception of 1 year. Althea said, I knew that I was an unusual, talented girl through the grace of God. I didn't need to prove that to myself. I only wanted to prove that to my opponents. Her ability on the court drew a lot of attention, including of some folks who wanted to see her do well. She was offered scholarships by some prominent members of the African American tennis community who helped her continue playing and helped her continue winning different championships across the United States. When she was 19, she moved to Wilmington, North Carolina, and that same year became the very first Black woman and the second Black athlete, period, to compete in the United States Lawn Tennis Association. Later that year, she entered Florida A&M University on a full athletic scholarship. She was the first Black woman to be offered a full athletic scholarship to that university. While in college, she continued to play tennis and she continued to compete at national levels, but she kept on being held back. Even though people could not deny her talent, they could not deny her elite level playing, she was still kept off of several courts because of race. After Gibson became spotlight of national attention after another tennis champion, Alice Marble, wrote a scathing letter talking about the racism of the American Tennis Association, she was the first Black player invited to play at the U.S. Nationals, which is now known as the U.S. Open. Althea was only 23 years old, and this was a major opportunity. She played her heart out and narrowly lost. But in doing so, she kind of broke a barrier very similarly to Jackie Robinson. She was compared to him in many different pieces because it was that big of a shakeup in the international tennis scene. But that was not the end for Althea. It was just the beginning. She went on to be the first Black woman to win a Grand Slam event, which is now known as the French Open. And the next year, she won both Wimbledon and the U.S. national matches, the first African American woman to do those things. She was awarded the title of the Best Female Athlete of the Year by the Associated Press in both 1956 and 1958. She was sent on a goodwill tour around the world, and when she came home, she was the second Black American after Jesse Owens to be honored with a ticker tape parade in New York City. In her last season as a professional tennis player, she won 57 straight matches in a row. She retired in 1958 after winning 56 national and international titles because her finances were not in great shape. Back then, professional tennis players were not allowed to get endorsement deals, so she had no kind of kickback. The matches didn't have a ton of prize money, and so quite frankly, it was very hard to support herself. She said being the queen of tennis is all well and good, but you can't eat a crown, and that was true. So she decided that she was going to take a break. She tried to parlay her celebrity into the entertainment industry, but it didn't really stick. So she decided she'd try something new. And in 1964, she became the very first African-American woman to join the Ladies Professional Golf Association. Even on the pro tour circuit, she still had to deal with a lot of racism, and she was often not allowed into the clubhouses of the golf courts where she would play. She was pretty good. She won a car, she won some money, but overall, it was not going to be the thing that stuck it out for her. She did break boundaries and made more space for African-American people on the golf course, but this was not going to be it for Althea. The 1970s kicked off with her being inducted into the International Tennis Hall of Fame, finally. She continued with tennis casually after this point, but was never able to really retain the former glory of her youth. Unfortunately, she was held back by so many things, but because of her, so many athletes were able to go even further. Althea said, no matter what accomplishments you make, somebody helped you. And she's right. She paved the way for so many people to move forward. And we as a community are so much stronger when we have other people that we can count on.